about us and sign up for regular updates in the future at nswoods.ca. Look under the Family Forest Network tab. So without too much more blather, I want to turn you over to Daniel Hart, one of our forestry extension professionals and a forest technician who will start us off tonight. Thank you all for coming, and hello, Daniel.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Andy, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. As Andy was saying, the picture is meant to be a joke. I have a fairly dry sense of humor, so I'm sorry if it falls a little flat on some of you. The joke is, I guess, a little true in some sense, where not all, as Andy had explained, not all may understand why a forest may or may not grow under different conditions, whereas a forester or forest technician or an extension forester is trained and experienced to figure out why and determine the best path forward. So tonight we're going to go over what is a forest professional, what do they do, why do we need forest professionals, how can they help you, and the contractor perspective. So what is a forest professional? They advise or direct corrective action as required to conserve, protect, manage, rehabilitate, or enhance forest lands, forest resources, or forest ecosystems. They also prepare, review, amend, and approve professional documents, professional work, or opinions. They assess the impact of professional forest activities, verify that those activities have been carried out as planned, directed, or advised. So the pictures I've brought up here, the one on the right-hand side, this is a forestry operation taking place down at the bottom of the hill. You can see two feller bunchers. One was cutting in a boundary. The second one went in to start cutting in roadways. This one to the left actually was taken just after Hurricane Fiona. This is a scorpion king that is clearing trails, reopening trails to access a treatment area. So speaking towards professional documents, these are all documents that I had utilized in my past. So one would be a planting report after a tree planting season. We also utilize harvesting and road activities pre-work, and then harvesting and road activities monitoring and inspection. Part of what a forest professional will do is plan, locate, and approve forest transportation systems, including forest roads, or in this case, as per the picture, bridges. So this bridge was something that I designed while working out in Alberta. Initially, I had recommended a snowfill or a native timber bridge, but the company I was contracted through, they liked engineering. They liked everything to have an engineer stamp of approval, so I had to utilize materials that allowed me to do that. Hence, it's over and above what was actually needed, but it got the job done and kept everybody safe and allowed the job to continue. We also assess properties through multiple different assessments. So the pictures I've just brought up, sorry for the quality of them. I've dropped my camera, my phone far too many times in the woods. But the one on the left, this would be a stream assessment that I was conducting. I've taken my tape measure, gone from bank to bank to get my bank width. I was also testing frost depth. The creek itself was found to be dry, not fish bearing. And then the frost depth was to determine how much frost was in the ground below those couple inches of ice or soil to see if it could support heavy traffic, or support a snowfill, or what type of crossing would be utilized within that location. The two pictures of the forest area showing ribbon, these are both plots that I've put in two different locations. The one on the top was a post-treatment plot done in a monoculture balsam fir stand. The one on the bottom was I believe, an MW2 pre-assessment. So what does a forest professional do? We do a number of different things. So we may work in wildfire prevention, regeneration, restoration, arboriculture, harvest planning, supervision, woody plant propagation, forest measurement, silviculture, identification, GPS and mapping, entomology, and pathology. It's also important to mention here that there are many hundreds of other jobs created through the forest sector. Contractors who operate forwarders and harvesters. There's the people who work in the mills or drive the haul trucks. There's research scientists, biologists, ecologists. There's too many professions to name. There are many, many people who make a profession either in working in the forest or through products derived from the forest. And each of these people, no matter what their profession is, have a great amount of knowledge behind their career and their experience, and we should all be willing to listen to them. So Ian Miller, who was accepted into the Forestry Hall of Fame at the AGM just the past week on the 23rd, he had said that the young should listen to the old and the old should listen to the young, and there is a lot that we can learn from each other. This is true in almost all cases, and it's true in the forestry sector as well. We should listen to each other and try to learn more from one another. So we are a collection of people who have made it our career to know how to properly and safely operate in the woods. We conduct assessments of the forest to understand where and when treatment is needed and what treatment should be utilized. Our intent is to promote a healthy and diverse forest while applying landowner objectives with ecological and economic factors. So a little bit about my history as a forest tech. I graduated from Sir Sandford Fleming College in Lindsay, Ontario in 2013. Here I took the forestry technician program, where I went through a number of courses based on the forest sector. From there, I moved to Mackenzie, BC, where I worked as a junior forest tech doing block road and cut block layout, as well as beetle sweeps. Mountain pine beetle was really big at that time, so we were going through doing sweeps of the mountainside, determining which areas were the most heaviest hit, also doing timber cruises and recce work. From there, I ended up in Fort McMurray, Alberta at Northland Forest Products Mill, a large lumber mill located north of the city, shown here in the picture. Here I worked as an operational and planning forester, looking after tree planting crews, harvesting crews, layout crews, as well as doing a number of those jobs myself. I developed plans as well as consulted with government, First Nations, and trappers and other industries within the area. From there, I moved on to a job called MLX West through Syncrude Canada. It was a mine expansion tree clearing operation where I worked closely with the environmental team to make sure that tree clearing operations fell within legislation and environmental management plans. And then from there, I was granted the opportunity to come out here and work with the Family Forest Network. I arrived in Nova Scotia last August and joined the team. So the Family Forest Network, I'm not going to speak much on this. They are the Nova Scotia Woodlot Owner and Operator Association, or NSWOA, was contracted to research and educate on ecological forestry. NSWOA, with 11 partners found across Nova Scotia, created the FFN to meet deliverables of this contract. We aim to be the starting point for woodland stewards who want to learn more about forest practices that mimic natural processes, promote biodiversity, and restore ecosystem health. Our team, so there's my ugly mug there, and then there's Ryan, Jackie, who is our FFN network manager, Andy, who works for NSWOA, and Chrissy, who also works for NSWOA, but we work closely together as a single team. Why do we need forest professionals? The Wabanaki forest provides a unique forest in the fact that it takes the boreal forest to the north and the deciduous forest to the south and mixes them together here in Nova Scotia. This creates a rich and diverse forest that supports many forms of flora and fauna. It's also important to note that the Wabanaki forest is endangered in North America. This is because of unsustainable forest practices, as well as climate change and borealization. As a forest professional, we hope to preserve this forest and create a more resilient forest for the future. To do this, we want to implement more ecologically based forest treatments. Treatments where soil nutrient levels, biodiversity, and climate resiliency are held to the same degree as economic values. It is also important to note that a forestry professional, now I should state that there is a difference between a registered forest professional and a registered forest technician and what I am speaking to right now. So a registered forest professional or professional forester, RPF or RPFT, registered professional forest technician, is somebody who went to an accredited school or program and is then joined a provincial organization for that profession. So here in Nova Scotia, it is RP FANS, Registered Professional Forest Association of Nova Scotia, and there's also NSFT, the Nova Scotia Forest Technician Association. So, excuse me, forestry professionals, and this is actually regulated through RPF and RPFT's bylaws, they have to stay up to date on changes in the sector, legislation governing forest practices, and the applicable information around the current condition and the future of our forests. They do this so that they can then educate and help others when asked what is best for my forest or for my woodland. So what threatens the Wabanaki forest? So these images here, this was actually taken from the Forest Biomass Energy Policy in the Maritime Provinces by Jamie Simpson. It's a good piece of literature if you're ever looking for something to pick up and read. This one here was Old Growth Forests of the Acadian Region Environmental Review, and this was actually recently released, the Nova Scotia Department of Environmental and Climate Change from December 2022. So climate change. According to that report I had just mentioned, temperatures will continue to rise. We will have less snow and more rain. The rain will be more intense. Storms will be more frequent and intense. The sea level will continue to rise. Ocean temperatures, oxygen, acidity levels will change, and there is an increased risk of insect infestation with all of that. Borealization is due to tree species more commonly found within the boreal forests. They're better adapted to frequent large-scale disturbances. For example, jack pine has evolved to a point where their cones will open under extreme heat. It's done this because wildfires are so prevalent where it is most commonly found. This allows them to more readily grow in adverse growing conditions and outcompete those species more commonly found in the deciduous forest to the south. Unsustainable practices is also an issue that creates, it actually emboldens or allows the other two, climate change and borealization, to take stronger effects. So unsustainable forest practices create areas that allow for those quick successional or more readily available tree species to take seed and take over quicker. These areas generally produce an even-aged, less diverse forest, which is more susceptible to large-scale disturbances and less resilient to the effect of climate change. From that report I had mentioned, the Weathering What's Ahead, it states that forest and wetland ecosystems and species that live in them face a range of hazards and other environmental pressures. This can affect their ability to provide clean air and water, recreation, and support livelihoods. So from this, we then take a look at the natural disturbance regimes found here in Nova Scotia. The picture, the multiple maps that is shown here, is the spruce budworm defoliation mapped in Nova Scotia from the years 1912 to 1986. This was pulled from the natural disturbance regimes for implementation of ecological forestry. It's important to utilize or to take a look at this because ecological forestry in itself tries to mimic natural disturbances. So the most predominant or most important natural disturbances found within Nova Scotia were fire, wind, and outbreaks of spruce budworm. We've As foresters and forest technicians or professional foresters, we have determined that biodiversity and forest productivity are more likely to persist or be best approximated by designing and applying forest management strategies and silvicultural systems that emulate natural disturbance regimes. So silviculture is used to emulate natural disturbances through cutting activities and the manipulation of stand age class structure. Depending on severity of disturbance, different age class structures will result. For example, a single high severity disturbance, like a massive hurricane, will usually kill most of the trees in a stand. This then creates, or more likely creates, an even-aged, less diverse stand. Whereas if we were to do repeated episodes of less disturbances, only taking a fraction of the trees, this then creates a multi-age, more diverse stand, which is much more resilient to climate change and much more resilient to large-scale disturbances like insect outbreak. The quote given here was taken from a U.S. Forest Service research ecologist named John Stanturf. Not much stands up to the highest wind speeds, except maybe live oak, a southern relative of the red oaks found in Nova Scotia, because of their growth habit and anchorage. The farther inland you get, the wind energy dissipates and you get less breakage and blowover. But even inland, you still get significant damage from the loss of major branches. I included that quote because it's important to note that with climate change coming and the predicted elements of climate change, it is hard to prepare for that because, as this quote states, many trees, when you have 100+ km/h sustained winds, they're going to snap, they're going to fall over. But it's also important to realize that this is a natural process, and this is a natural process that we can utilize to better our forests. So when something like this happens, we can go in, we can assess the area, we can determine our path route forward. So how can a forest professional help you? At this point, I will hand it over to Ryan Dickey. Ryan, whenever you're ready, I can continue the slides. Can't hear you, Ryan.
How about now?
Gotcha.
That's a little better. I had my headphones working, but they stopped halfway through, I guess. So yeah, I'll pick it up from here for Dan. I'm Ryan Dickey. Dan and I work in the same position, basically, for the Family Forest Network. Similar education background as Dan. I actually graduated through the Nova Scotia Community College with in their Natural Resource and Environmental Technology program. And I've spent my entire career in Nova Scotia. So I right out of school worked for a contractor that did a lot of planting and silviculture work for Bowater. I worked there and did planting quality audits and stuff. Did a little bit of silviculture work, and then we logged with chainsaws in the winter times. Did that for a few years, and then went out on my own. Actually worked mostly as a silviculture contractor. Also wrote some management plans. Did a little bit of logging, that type of work. Again, just in the winters as a way to keep busy. I went and worked. I was actually a harvesting and silviculture supervisor for J.D. Irving at their Sproul mill in Truro for 2.5 years, I think it was. Left working full time in the forest industry for a couple of years, right around the time that Northern Pulp was closing down, just because we had a baby on the way and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I went and worked actually as a carpenter for a few years, and then when this job came up, jumped at the opportunity to come back to it. Still worked in the woods a little bit. I've kept up at a pretty low key level with my own business. Do a little bit of silviculture work, write a few plans here and there. Still, so how a forest professional can help you? Really, I guess we can go to the next slide there, Dan. But really, the biggest thing to remember when you first start with talking about any of this is no matter who the forest professional is, that if you're hiring them, they're there to help you. So what they should really be helping you do is identify what your specific goals are for your woodlot or the piece of forest that you're stewarding, and help you work towards them. That should be always should be the number one goal, no matter if you've got the most beautiful forest in the world, all kinds of great big timber, or you just bought an old clear cut and you're just looking at a way to try and restore it. So some of the things that we would take on woodlot assessments. I've done a lot of those over the years. Not necessarily doing a management plan or anything, but just kind of I'll go out for a day or two with the woodlot owner and just walk through, just take a general walk, give them a rough idea of what they have for stands. If there's any health concerns, big ones on the horizon now with some of the pests we have, especially emerald ash borer and hemlock woolly adelgid. So those would be a big one, and something that most woodlot owners should be thinking about now. If you're not able to identify those pests yourself, you should maybe not every year, but every couple of years have somebody out, even if it's just for a half day, to take a quick run through and make sure that you're not infested and don't even know it. So, but we'd walk through, look at stuff like that, look at stands that are just getting a little bit old, especially the slightly degraded nature of a lot of woodlots. There's lots of people that have old white spruce or balsam fir starting to fall down, and if you're not in your woods every day, or if you can't, a forest professional can really pick up on the early warning signs that a stand's starting to decline, and kind of be able to point it out and ring the alarm for you. That probably, if you're worried about the economics, at least maybe you should get in there and do something for it. So. Yeah, so then when it comes time for actually doing any harvesting or anything, we'll look after all the layout and mapping, using GPS, GIS, everything. That's a standard course in any of the yeah, it's a big one in any of the forestry courses that we do now is to learn how to utilize all the new technology. And there's a lot of new stuff coming on now too, and starting to become more readily available, like the use of drones for mapping, getting up to date aerial photos. There's also LiDAR that we can use for a lot more detailed information. And Dan alluded to the idea that as forest professionals, we really need to keep up with continuing educations and kind of stay with the time. And that's one of the big ones that a lot of us are doing now is, there's all kinds of continuing education credits, short little 1 or 2 day courses, or even as part of a climate change initiative. I know the federal government has actually provided a lot of funding for short courses. I'm in two new GIS analysis courses just, online over the next few weeks here. So. But yeah, so we can do the mapping. We'll do the layout. We're up to date on all the regulations around boundary lines, anything to do with water courses, wildlife, what to do if you find a nest or anything like that. So, all right, next slide there. Dan, I don't know if you want to explain what all the photos are. These are yours. So.
So just speaking towards layout, this was a bear den I located while laying out an area. The bear den was declared active due to the hoarfrost shown in this picture here. So hoarfrost normally forms within a den due to the sleeping animal. Their breathing creates the frost on the roof of the den or entrance into the den. So this area here, we placed a 100-meter buffer around it, completely cut it out of the treatment area. And that spring, the bear was actually spotted leaving the den.
So then keep going on. Education and guidance. This is kind of one of my favorite ones. It's not always, when you first get into working in forestry, it's not necessarily the first thing you think of, but especially with the jobs that Dan and I have, and I've been involved with the woodlot owners and operators for a long time. It's always so much fun to get out with folks and actually walk on their woodland and try and point a few things out that, like I say, if you don't have a trained if you're not trained what to watch for, it's not something that you would necessarily see. So, but that's a big thing, especially in private land. Forestry is being able to to guide landowners and help them, like I say, work towards the goals that they have for their property. It's also a good reason to work with the forest professionals. We can help get you connected. It's forestry is a big industry in the province, but Nova Scotia is still a small place. There's very few contractors or anywhere you're going to go that I wouldn't know somebody that works in the woods and that can help out. And that's always a nice reason to have somebody that's helping you out with your woodlot. Is they might know that a contractor that works the way that you want to see your woodlot managed might be just down the road and might be able to hook you up together to actually get some work done. It's these days, especially after the hurricane and everything, it's not the easiest to find a contractor. So you want to take advantage of any avenue necessary possible to do it. So we also provide research and fact-based answers to your questions, and I feel pretty confident I can speak on behalf of most forest professionals. At least there's hardly a week that goes by that I don't at least look over some new research article that came out. There's, same as you folks are here watching this webinar tonight, there's hundreds and hundreds of them out there for forest professionals too. So it's I like to at least one day a week. I'll start my morning with just a coffee, and while I'm eating breakfast, watch a half hour, 45-minute webinar about something. Seems like all the time lately it's just hemlock woolly adelgid for me, because it's one thing I'm most worried about and interested in. But they're out there on everything, and most forest professionals keep up on it. So, and then we get sustainability and resilience. That's those are big hot topics now, and something that a lot of us are still getting further education on. There's no debate anymore. I don't think that climate change is a thing, and it's going to affect us. And right now, there's every week something else to read about. How we're going to have to adapt our silviculture practices, what trees are going to do well, what won't. Pests that might be. Hemlock woolly adelgid isn't the last pest that we're going to get. So that's on us as forest professionals to stay up on top of those things, and then make sure that we can kind of disseminate that information and get it out to landowners and help people know what to plan for before. It's good to plan and maybe make some changes to your management plan or your management style before they actually land here. So go on to the next one, Dan. This is just 3 pictures here. This is the forest ecosystem classification for Nova Scotia. Put those in there. I really want to highlight that anyone as a landowner should know. You don't need to know any of the information in these, but you should know that they exist and that forest professionals really should be using these. It's when you get reading and talking to people from other parts of the country and even North America, this ecosystem classification guide for us in Nova Scotia is it's a real gem, really. Like it's not common for all the provinces to have something exactly like this. And basically what it is you can see there's vegetation types, soil types. So when we go out in the woods and do a pre-treatment assessment, traditionally for harvesting, through our family forest network projects, we're actually bringing it in on the silviculture side too. But so we would assess the vegetation types on the particular stand on your lot and the soil types. And then from what we come up with there, we'll get eco sites. And it's all good information, just about what's there, what are some likely pathways that it will develop. And then especially with soils, there's all kinds of new research and new tools that we have coming out in the province now about soil sustainability and kind of the nutrient levels and how much wood you can actually take off of a site just purely based on the soil type and soil depths and everything. So it's put the pictures in just to say, if you're doing anything in your woodlot and you have a forest professional involved, it's a good thing to ask them about if they've consulted any of these manuals. So. Next one there. So management plans. Management plans are a big one. Not super common in Nova Scotia. I wish they were a little more common. With those, one of the biggest ones I say, and a good way to highlight it is, with what went on in, I'm sure for some people on the call here, even with Hurricane Fiona, if you've got a good up-to-date management plan, it's, they're fairly descriptive. Most management plans now encompass kind of all the values for your lots. It won't just be this stand has this many cubic meters per hectare or anything like that. It'll also pick up, at least I know in ones that I would write, try and pick up on, if there's a unique plants or a particularly big old tree or biologically significant tree, unmapped streams, wetlands, a vernal pool, anything, try and put those on the maps. And, after something like Hurricane Fiona, where everything's blown down and you don't really know which way is what in your woodlot, it's so valuable to have those on maps, which means if they're on maps, they've been GPSed and put in a GIS software and makes it a little bit easier. You don't necessarily have to even walk out and mark that area out on your woodlot if you were planning a salvage harvest, because it's already been walked and marked out, before you've had a big natural disaster like that. So generally with a management plan, what we would do is, I've seen them for longer, maybe for bigger forests, but for a small private landowner, usually what you would do is have a plan written for your woodlot. It's a 10-year plan, and then you would make updates to it. A lot of people will do updates after 5 years. I say even after, if you wrote your management plan and then in year 3 have a big harvest and some silviculture work and everything done, you should at least get get your new maps and everything put into the plan. It's it's not a document that as soon as it's handed over to the landowner, it's just there for 10 years. It should be kind of a living, breathing thing, especially if it's a forester or forest tech that you're going to work with, over the whole 10-year period that you have the lot. There's always reasons to add on to any of those. And then also contractor supervision. So, we as forest professionals, whether it's professional forester, forest tech, or even contractors would fall under this one. But we understand the treatment that will be carried out. We should have had extensive dealings with either the landowner or their own forester. Know all the legislations, all the there's pitfalls with any harvest site or silviculture site, and we should know what they are, what to watch out for, and just as a supervisor, you're there to make sure that what's planned is what gets carried out, and if there's some reason why things can't be done, you're there and able to identify that. So next one there, Dan. This one's you again.
Just speaking towards contractor supervision. So the picture on the left, just tell a short story here. This was a logging camp that I did an inspection with a Alberta government representative when we arrived at the time of the inspection. The wastewater line you see in this picture was actually disconnected and there was wastewater everywhere. I was with a government representative at the time. I then contacted the contractor in charge of this camp, who informed me that the pipe had frozen overnight. He was currently in town getting the replacement parts and a heat trace. The government rep gave us 24 hours to rectify the problem. And these are the pictures from the report provided to that government rep showing that the problem had been rectified. The line was reconnected back into the submersible storage tank, which would be under here, and all of it was cleaned up. In the picture on the right-hand side, this was a treatment area, or cut block as referred to out in Alberta. Part of our pre-assessment is checking on potential high archaeological sites or high historic areas. So this red polygon you would see here came up on a map saying, hey, this area has the potential for historic resource. So we then cut that out, and the purple would be the buffer that we placed on that. So what would have happened is I would have provided this map to a contractor with the shapefile. They would have went in, removed the old flagging, tied in new flagging to represent the buffer around this, and then I would have field checked to make sure that it was done before operations commenced.
There. So now this is kind of right up my alley. Like I said, I worked as a contractor almost a little bit for some mills, but almost exclusively on small private. That's where most of my experience is in Nova Scotia. So, just from my perspective as somebody who, I never owned big equipment. I didn't have a harvester, but I had an old cable skidder, chainsaw, did a lot of silviculture work and road clearing and everything else. So from my perspective as a contractor, some of the big things that a landowner can do, number one always is have clear goals, as best as you can. Obviously, you're not necessarily forest professionals, so you might not know everything, and a contractor might be able to give you some guidance, but you should at least, by the time you get to the stage of bringing a contractor in, you're probably going to want to know roughly what it is that you want to do. And I would say if you're, if it's something that you're pretty apprehensive about, you don't have to do, there's nothing that says you have to do any of this forestry work. And it's for the ease of, having a good relationship, making sure the job goes through smoothly. It's if you're kind of on the fence about it, maybe it's best to stay on the fence until you know for sure what it is that you want to do, or your woodlot might tell you that you need to do it in terms of, like I say, if you had a bunch of old fir or something like that that's starting to die, you can either watch it fall down or harvest it, right? So, and then to go along with that, try and find a contractor that's aligned with your values. So, if you're a small private, you want to do smaller harvests and everything, your neighbor next door that's got all the biggest gear in the world and mostly works for big mills, not that they're a bad person or they're doing anything wrong, but they might not be the best fit for you. Industrial forestry and small private, it's still cutting trees, putting them roadside and getting them to the mill, but there can be pretty big differences in how things are done, and there's nothing wrong with that either. That's just kind of the way it goes. So having a forest professional is an intermediary. So for a landowner, I think we'll always, as the Woodlot Owners and Operators Association, I think we'd always promote that if you can find somebody that's a forester, forest tech, even if it's not someone that's going to write you a management plan and everything, if they've been in the woods and they've got lots of experience and they can just be somebody that's there to help guide you and make sure that you're getting the job that you want, that's always a good thing. It's as a contractor, it's always nice to go work for somebody that had a forester, because then the landowners talk to the forester, they've gone over their goals, identified exactly what they want to have done, and then when it's my turn to show up and actually start planning the work and start implementing the plan, generally, I always want to have a relationship with the landowner, but if I have questions or when we first start talking about everything, if I'm talking with a forester, one thing, and I know Lois Miller's watching this, I helped her with a plan once, and I think I ended up with a glossary that was 10 pages long by the time we're done. We're horrible as forest professionals for knowing, we have a different lingo that most people wouldn't understand, and I might say something one way and there's 10 different ways to say it, but we all mean the same thing. So for me as a contractor, it was always nice to work with a forester that, we understand each other on that level, and you don't have to be quite so careful about how you're going to put everything, I guess. So if that makes sense. All right, next one there, Dan. And then speak up. That's like I said, I love going out in the woods with landowners. I'm a generally really quiet person, but if you want to talk trees, I'll talk trees all day with you and miss my next meeting, everything. I'm notorious for that. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And like I said, if you're not comfortable with what's going to be done on your lot, probably shouldn't be done. So one of the best ways to get comfortable is just to keep asking questions. And don't worry if you shouldn't feel bad that you're asking so many questions, or that you think maybe you're wasting somebody's time. You're definitely not, because like I say, having clear goals and being very clear about exactly what's going to go on with the job is one of the most important things. So once you actually have some work on the go, same thing, try, if you can, meet on site regularly. And even if you're somebody that can't necessarily get into the woods, come out and just have a meeting on the landing. You can, you'll get a sense of who the contractor is and what's going on, even just by looking at their landing. Do they have good housekeeping? They're not, rutting up your ditches, or they're looking after everything that way. There's not a whole bunch of garbage laying around, or old hydraulic hoses or anything like that. And also today, everyone's got everybody has a camera and a video, can take videos right in their pocket on your cell phone. So if you can't get to the woods, there's nothing wrong with it, whether it's your contractor or your forester that you're working with. Someone go out and shoot a few videos, just kind of highlighting what's going on. There's no reason not to know how things are going, and it's slowly coming. There's a lot of people out there with drones now too. I know even a bunch of contractors are using them just as a way to, it's a pretty easy way to do a site inspection, especially on a bigger harvest, to be able to come out, fly the whole area. You can kind of see where there's wood left. If there was wood missed in a corner portion of the block, you can, drones are so great for all that type of stuff, even identifying issues. I've used one a little bit before, and found a spot where there's some rotting issues on a main trail, and was able to just walk right out there, talk to the guy in the forwarder, say, hey, we could haul some more brush, fix this up. And but yeah, you should definitely be doing that. And then, like I say, I don't know any forest professionals that don't want to stand there and talk trees and logging or anything else and answer all those questions. It's definitely something we like doing. So next slide, Dan. The due diligence. Definitely get references. If you're going to work with somebody, if they're a good reputable contractor, forest professional, your forest manager, anything, first thing I would do, whether you approach them, they approach you, if after a first meeting you think, this maybe is somebody I want to work with, there's nothing wrong with asking, who was the last 2 or 3 woodlots that you were on. Some previous woodlot owners might not want to be contacted, but some probably will, and generally people should be able to give references. So all contractors, and that includes the forest professionals, they have to carry liability insurance and workers' comp. Liability used to be $2 million in general liability. I think they've bumped that up on Crown land, and most mills now ask for $5 million. And if it's good for Crown and on the mills land, it's probably good for private woodlot owners too. And then workers' comp, and that covers you. So if something happened on your woodlot and you don't want to be held liable for it, so their insurance covers that, and workers' comp would be cover off if forestry is generally pretty safe, but it's a little more dangerous than most professions, and you want to make sure that you're not going to be liable if somebody ever got hurt. There's also other things to think about, like fire suppression equipment. So that's what the photo is there. Even a tree planting site. One of the first forest fires I was ever on was on a tree planting site, which there's no machinery, no anything else, but somebody just happened to be smoking a cigarette, flipped the butt off into the brush. And even with 20 of us there and all kinds of those backpacks and everything, by the time the fire department got there, we had a 5 or 6 hectare fire on the go and burned a bunch of newly planted trees and everything else. So you don't necessarily have to know exactly what the regulations are, but depending on what's going on, if you're working with a forest, like somebody to help you with your management, they should know where to find it. If it's with a contractor, I just ask them directly. They can go to the I think it's forest sustainability regulations, or I can't remember which ones, but they should be able to show you exactly. There's a list. If you're doing harvesting work with this many people, you have to have a minimum of this type of equipment. So, and then same thing with I'd say spill kits. So spill kits definitely for machinery, but I always kept them. Even for me as a pre-commercial thinning contractor, we just ran with chainsaws and brush saws, but always tried to keep something around just in case. I once had a guy leave a 10-liter jug of fuel in the woods, and a bear chewed the side out of the gas jug, and we had to dig up a bunch of contaminated soil and haul it back out to the roadside. It's good practices to do stuff like that, and most of them is regulated anyway, and they should have that type of stuff. So next one there, Dan. This is just another one on management plans. That's actually just a stand map, a plant treatment map for a woodlot that I've been involved in managing. So big ones with management plans, it's a big upfront cost. Even for a 100-acre woodlot, to do just a basic management plan, you're talking 3 or 4 days for forest professionals. $1,200-$1,500 for a basic plan. If you're somebody that's interested in biodiversity or birds, anything else like that, you might actually have them bring in a biologist to do another portion about any of the non-timber values. So it can go up, but it generally is a cost savings in the long term. So you can see all the different colors on the map there. Purple is for some type of selection management, single tree harvest or gap, like a regular shelter woods. Blue would be commercial thinning. The green was pre-commercial thinning. So it makes planning for the long term. As a forester, forest tech, we might be able to look at a site and say, hey, this needs maybe 5 to 10 years, but then it's going to be a perfect site for a commercial thinning project. We can kind of identify that on the map, like that one's done there in STAM 102, and maybe even have already done a little bit of the pre-planning work. When you're getting some volumes and everything for your management plan, and then it's there and identified, and then even you may work with a forester that moves to Alberta or something like that, but you still have that plan, have everything that they planned on there for you, and it makes it easier for the next person that comes in. They can just look and be like, okay, I need to go check that note right now, and there's a big time saving. So and then, like I say, with a natural disaster or anything else, it's kind of all right there. You can paint a picture of what your forest used to look like before it blew down or burnt or anything like that.
Ryan, let me just throw in here that while you're on management plans and talking about non-timber values, Family Forest Network will be doing biodiversity plans for people who are not participating in our pilot. So if this is something you're interested, assessing your lot for habitat and species and options for the future, you'll see Daniel or Ryan's contact information at the back, and give them a call and we can talk about that. It's at somewhat of a discount because of our funding. It is not free, however.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing I'd highlight with that too, Andy, is as forest professionals, if you took even 15 or 20 years ago, a lot of forestry schools were really geared around growing timber. It was starting to come around for that sort of stuff, but there's a lot more about the ecology of your woodlot, and a lot more of maybe the younger professionals are really interested in the wildlife and biodiversity and everything else. And we've also identified it as a big problem. We have a biodiversity crisis in our woodlands, so it's there's a lot more training, and I think a lot more on the way for both the biologists, but also kind of that's starting to filter down to us as forest professionals too. So there's lots of folks out there that can, even without bringing somebody else in, it can help out with a lot of that type of stuff. So, and then like I said before, if you've got a management plan, it should be a living document, gets updated regularly. Like this one in particular, I've helped out with them. I've done most of the work on that woodlot, or helped plan most of the work on that woodlot, but I didn't actually write the management plan. The landowner and I met afterwards, and so we followed along mostly, but I've made a few changes here and there, and it's been a couple of years now that we had worked together, and time to update the plan. We're not going to wait the full 10 years or anything. It's time to get those updated and just make sure we stay as current as possible with it. So next one there, Dan. So then paying forest professionals. This one's not necessarily always talked about enough. So for contractors generally, if you could break it down into harvesting contractors and then maybe row building and silviculture. So harvesting contractors generally are going to be paid on a mill scale. So what I mean by that is most mills now pay by the ton. The truck just takes the logs across the scale and you're paid that way. There's some smaller mills that might buy by the cord or by the 1,000 board feet. And generally what you would have is, ahead of time what products you're probably going to generate from a harvest, how the mill pays, and you'll have an agreed upon rate between yourself and the contractor of what their rate is per ton, per cord, anything like that. Silviculture is generally paid per hectare for the most part. For the longest time, at least, silviculture has always been, essentially, I hate to call it free to the landowner, but there's no cost at the time of doing the silviculture work. So silviculture is funded through the government chips in a portion of it, the mills pay for some, and then technically when you sell wood to the mill, there's $1 per ton or something like that that's taken off at the mill at the time of sale, and then that goes into the silviculture fund to pay for that work. I say generally it's no cost. It's been a really long time since they updated the rates for silviculture, and I know some contractors have started to ask for a little bit of money kicked in, which I don't think is unfair. It's hard to work for 10, 15, 20 years and not see your rates go up, but everything, the cost of everything else does. So, some folks, especially on, maybe mist sites that are towards the maximum heights or diameters and are a little bit tougher, guys are asking for that. So, just to say that, you may have a contractor do work for you, and that's what's going to happen. It should be clearly outlined, same as what a harvesting contractor is being paid. It should be rated in a contract and very clear up front. Road building kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're just doing upgrades or anything like that, they might bill you a daily rate or an hourly rate or anything like that. On a bigger road job, especially with an established road builder, I've done lots of work by the meter, by the 10 meters or anything. The guys that do it all the time, they're generally, they're well experienced. They can look at a site and say, it's going to take me this amount of time, and this is what I need per meter to do the work. And then most any other tasks that you might be hiring a contractor for, whether it's, redoing your boundary lines, you might have an old road that needs the ditches brushed out, kind of doing anything like that. Usually that's going to be hourly work. And then, like I say, no matter how a contractor is being paid, you should have a signed document that outlines exactly what they're going to be paid. And that's previous slide that a contractor should have their insurance, workers' comp, everything. You should have copies of that with the contract. So, and then for forest professionals, management plans, usually, at least in my experience, I would always do a quoted price for a management plan. Generally have a pretty good idea. If you look at a site, how many hectares the woodlot might be, how some woodlots are easy. If it's fairly contiguous, there's not that many stands. I might add in a little bit if you've got, woodlot with all kinds of different stands and eco sites and everything. But generally those ones would be paid just a quoted price. Miscellaneous activities, so that would be, like a forest health assessment. Maybe, I've been called in by landowners before that know that the woodlot owner next door is having a harvest done, and they just want you to come walk and make sure that the boundary lines are in good shape and that there's no timber trespass or anything. For those, I've always done it hourly or on a day rate or a half day rate, usually. Harvest planning supervision is often paid for a lot of folks. It's paid on the mill scale, so that would be one where you may contract someone like myself or Dan to come in. We're going to plan the harvest, lay it out, do everything, help you find the contractor. We'll be there to supervise. So a lot of folks over the last, I think basically forever, have always done it. Someone like that might be paid, a couple bucks a ton for the or whatever the mill scale is for that project. I just put in a little thing, and this is all just kind of my own personal opinion. I know there's some others out there that say the same thing. I prefer, if I can, to be paid a day rate or an hourly rate or just an agreed set upon rate for the entire job, simply because if you're paying somebody by the ton to plan a harvest, it's in their benefit to cut maybe a little bit more wood, and the more wood they cut, the bigger your paycheck is. And I've done lots of projects where that's how I was paid. But the more I think about it, the more it just feels better for me to say, I'm going to come out and it's going to take me 3 days to plan it and 2 days to do the supervision and a day to do, wrap up and any assessments afterwards. And this is what I'm going to get paid no matter what the size of the job is. Just covers everyone off and make sure that you're being as honest as possible, I guess. So that's not to say anyone getting paid the other way isn't honest. It's just in my opinion, I'd rather do it on the day rate. So next one there, Dan. Payment to landowners. Payment to landowners, same thing. It's should be very clearly outlined in the contract exactly what you're going to pay for each product. And also it should be on a schedule. You don't want to get on, I'm sure some people may have the horror stories, have heard the horror stories. You get on a site where there was no schedule for payments, and then you're kind of chasing your contractor for a few weeks, a few months to get paid for those last few loads of wood. So every mill has a payment schedule. For me, I'm in Enfield here. I've got Elmsdale Lumber to my north. They pay every week. Leadwood Lumber pays every 2 weeks. Every time, if it was on my woodlot and I was selling to those two mills, every time my contractor got paid from Elmsdale, which would be weekly, I would expect to get paid on that same schedule. And then same thing for Leadwood, they pay every 2 weeks. I would want to be paid from that mill on that schedule. And that just makes sure that, the part of that payment that's coming to you, there's no reason for them to hang on to any of it. And then to say that both of those mills and most mills in the province, especially if your contractor or your forester has a relationship with them, they can actually set it up. Like if I was selling logs to Elmsdale Lumber and I had a rate for the guy cutting the wood, rate for my trucker, rate for the landowner, and maybe a rate for myself as the forest professional, I can tell them exactly what it is, and they'll make the payments to everybody. Make the payments to everybody involved. And then just the last one is that every time you do get paid, you should get mill slips for that pay period with the payment. Most people will send them to you digitally. It doesn't matter if you want that, or you can also get physical copies too. But you should have the mill slips, and then that way, at the end of the job, so you can kind of go through and just make sure you've got paid for all the slips that you've got and reconcile all your files. So, next one, Dan, I think that might have been it from you. I can't remember. There we go.
Thanks, Ryan. So just to summarize, quick summary, forest professionals have made it our career to know what is best for our woodlands. The Wabanaki forest is in danger from borealization, climate change, and unsustainable forest products. Forest professionals can help you build a diverse and resilient forest, one that promotes the ecology of the forest while considering the landowner and economic objectives. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel and Ryan. Appreciate it. That was very comprehensive, and I suspect that there are a few questions at least, and possibly many. For those of you who want to ask questions, please raise your hand or put them in chat. And know that both Ryan and Daniel and myself are available. You have contact information on the screen right now for both of them. And I would encourage you to contact them with other questions that may not be answered tonight or things that you're unclear about. The point here was simply to demystify things. It's hard for us because we're trying to thread a needle, right? We're a landowner association, so your concerns have got to be our highest priority, and the capacity of you to manage to your values has got to be our most important goal. And yet we understand the difficulties that both contractors and forest professionals face and their essential role in delivering services that we need in order to achieve our own goals. So we try to keep you alert to some of the challenges you may face without implying that there are let's just say situations that are troubling potentially for landowners. We try to alert you to them without demonizing anybody. We're here to help you with that. We're strong supporters of the involvement of forest professionals in this process, as Ryan said. For most people who have not done harvests, who are just starting out, you will get more of what you want if a forest professional is involved. And a good forest professional, it's our belief, can help contractors actually have less hassles and an easier time in delivering the services that they need to deliver profitably in order to stay in business. So enough said about that, I think. Questions from anyone. And Christy, you may have to help me find hands. I'm not even I'm not even sure where to
Sure.
look, but feel free to.
Anyone who has a question can put it in the chat, but if you want to say it verbally, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a little happy face that says reactions. If you click on that, it'll give you the option to raise your hand, and that'll pop up in your screen. Oh, I see Gary. So I'm going to give you the power to unmute yourself. So you should be able to now, Gary.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't know if this is related to this or not, but I'm wondering, is the family forest developing any kind of a key that a landowner is going to be able to go down through? Like you walk through your own woodlot, you got a key, and I realize that there's a lot of levels of at different education levels. But in particular, the one that I'm interested in is that during my 10 years of working for Lands and Forests from 1978 to 88, I supervised the planting of 5 million trees in Cumberland County. And 95% of that was on farm fields. And of course, the objective at that time was we were growing timber as much as we could, and we were going to thin it out and get those trees bigger and then flatten it and then replant it again. But I'm thinking now there's going to be some options to do some thinning and then do some underplanting. So I'm just wondering if there's been any thought put into what kind of species can we underplant to give that diversity to those lots, because they are all monoculture, I guess you'd call it. I'm just wondering if there is any movement on that, or if it's still too early to tell, or what's going on there.
Yeah, so we'll have like one of the things we're hoping to do, Gary, with the Family Forest Network stuff is kind of be able to highlight a whole bunch of the harvests and some of the planning that goes along with that. So like we haven't really talked about having necessarily a key for anyone, but definitely highlight all the work that we're doing. And then I know like I've been helping with Christy to put together our outreach proposal for next year, and that's kind of specifically one of the things we're hoping with the woodlot owners and operators to be able to do next year is some more. Wouldn't necessarily be a key, but that's all not a terrible idea. It's something to look at, but we'd really like to have some field events that are a bit less of something like this where it's Dan and I talking and we just talk about everything, and actually host a few events where it's a plan a harvest event where we'll go to a site where we're actually talking about doing some harvesting. You can come out, anyone as a landowner. It might be less valuable for you, Gary. You've got more experience in the forestry than Dan and I put together. But for a landowner with no education in this, you could come out, walk through, see what we do with our pre-treatment assessments, how we use the forest ecosystem classification, looking at soils and veg type and everything. And there's so much more you can learn when you're actually out there in the woods and dig a hole and get your hands dirty and learn to identify a few trees and stuff. So, but by the end of the Family Forest Network project, probably we'll have enough information that we can come up with some keys or some better guidance for all of that type of stuff.
Yeah, you should know, Gary, that this is a subject that's really close to our hearts. I mean, I look for the time when we can do forestry in a phone, right? And you can actually take a picture with your phone and get information about maybe through the FEC that'll tell you some of the things that you were referring to and so forth. But in the meantime, all of the work that we're doing is being incredibly deeply assessed before and after harvest, and the costs and the activities and the changes are all going to be presented in a series of sort of mini case studies, so that you'll be able to go to 10 planting jobs and look at what was done and why it was done and how it turned out, for example. So we're chipping away at the edges of that, and a key is a fine idea, and we'll certainly we'll throw that into our mix. That's actually a pretty good idea, and I'd like to see how it might work out for us.
Well, I guess one of the reasons why I bring that up is I'm pretty familiar with Cumberland County, and I know that after we get this Fiona mess cleaned up, that there's likely going to be some movement into some plantations, and this is a whole new world for me included. I mean, because I was an industrial type person, and So we're certainly gonna need all the help that you can give us, that's for sure.
I hope that we can forge really good relationships. All of us have been trying to reach out, and we've occasionally had missteps by its nature. You know, Gary, these can be contentious changes that are happening, but we're trying to do the right thing, and I hope that counts for something. Anyway,
Yeah. Thank you.
I do see a question by Ken Zwicker for either of you who might want to.
So I was actually typing out a response there, but just a couple of things that came to my head right away, Ken, was you should be able to request from your contractors the machine hours or the personnel hours. You should keep a record of that to know how long that machine was working or those people were working on your woodland or within your woodland. You can also request maps or request a total area treated as well as the treatment implemented. You should keep records of that, as Ryan was explaining. Even if it's not important to you at that moment, down the line, should you call in a forester or forest technician or somebody at a later date, that information can be very beneficial to them in helping plan out whatever goals you are now trying to reach within your woodland. Those are the first couple of things that come to my head there, Ken.
Yeah, definitely. Volumes and stuff are a big one to keep. So, I mean, if you were having a clear cut done, it's still nice to just for a historical record to know, how many tons per acre, cubic meters per hectare, whatever come off. And then also, if you're talking commercial thinning, some type of partial harvest, definitely nice to. You should always, especially if you're working with a forest professional, you should always get some type of summary of, there's exactly this much wood cut over this many hectares in this year, and because that'll be a big one for guiding future plans. And then also same with that, if you did have commercial thinning done, if it was submitted for any type of silviculture funding, you should have maps of what was done there, but also in order to do that, you have to take post-harvest volumes and everything, and a few other measurements, and those would be important too, because that way, if you know what the post-harvest volume was immediately post-harvest, you can it gives you a lot clearer picture of how that stand's responding and how it's developing. If you go back every couple of years and take a few volumes and look at it, you might be able to say, well, Jesus, it's growing slow. This is growing fast. After 5 or 6 years, you might have an idea that maybe we're going to be back in here after 10 years, or maybe it might take 20 years, or maybe we should, put this site to bed for a little while because it needs a rest. Or so we don't have a template for it, but give it time. We're going to have that for Family Forest Network jobs anyway, and that's probably something that we can come up with some type of template that we can share with landowners for sure.
Any other questions? So the recording of this webinar will be made available to all of you. Christy had it up within a couple of days. We're really quite flat out at the moment, but as soon as she gets it converted and posted somewhere, you'll get an email, and it'll be available for you, and also available publicly for folks who didn't attend, so you can refer people to it. What else did I miss? Anything at all? Let's see. That's about it, I think. Last words, Daniel or Ryan?
I just highlight, our emails are there on the screen. If you're somebody that's watching this as a post webinar recording and you've got questions, definitely fire them off. One thing we're hoping to do a lot more of this year is be more engaged on social media, and you might have some questions that the best way to answer it is like I say, for Dan or I to take our phones and shoot a quick little 2-minute video out in the woods, and we're always looking for topics. We want to shoot some videos that are relevant and of interest to landowners. So don't be even if you don't have a question now, just keep those emails, and if ever you have anything, we're usually pretty good at trying to get back to you. And if we don't know the answer, generally we know somebody that does. So
As Ryan mentioned earlier, we all love talking trees, so don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll get back to you as soon as you can, or as soon as we can. And thank you all for joining us.
Yes, thanks to our 2 extension forest professionals, and thank you all who were here tonight. Good night.